Honorable Tecumseh, now the governor of South Coast, stood in his luxurious office overlooking the sprawling city. The man who once celebrated his son Boyo's engagement to Vera was now deep in thought, his cunning mind crafting a plan. Canty, still in wrongful conviction, posed a threat to his carefully constructed empire. The evidence that could have exonerated Canty had also unearthed Tecum's web of corruption, leaving him vulnerable. Tecum needed a way to permanently remove Canty from the picture. "We'll bury him this time," Tecum told his aide with a cold smile. "Contact the National Prison Authorities. I want him transferred to South Coast under my jurisdiction. I'll handle the rest." Days later, the country was rocked by a shocking announcement broadcast on national television. Bold headlines scrolled across the screen. "Exposed. Notorious drug baron Canty linked to multiple murder." The news anchor's voice dripped with urgency. "Governor Tecumseh has revealed a breakthrough in the fight against organized crime. A daring investigation has unmasked Canty, a man who eluded authorities for years, as the mastermind behind a vast drug syndicate responsible for countless deaths." Images of Canty, taken during his retrial, flashed on the screen alongside fabricated evidence linking him to murders and narcotics. Vera, seated in the living room of Boyo's family estate, watched in stunned silence. Eddie played nearby, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his mother's mind. "It can't be true," she whispered, her heart sinking. But as the broadcast continued, the weight of the accusations began to chip away at her resolve. Boyo entered the room, his expression somber yet opportunistic. "Now you understand why I always told you to stay away from him," he said gently. "He's dangerous, Vera." Vera didn't respond. The man she had once loved deeply now seemed like a stranger, a shadow of the person she thought she knew. Time passed, and Vera's life in South Coast took on a new rhythm. As the wife of the governor's son, she found herself in the spotlight, a darling of society. Boyo, now more attentive and supportive, encouraged her to open a boutique. The grand opening of Eddie's Haven, a luxurious fashion boutique, was a resounding success. Vera poured her creativity into the venture, showcasing designs that blended Ankara with contemporary styles. The boutique became a favorite among elites, cementing her status as a rising star in South Coast. But beneath the glamour and applause, Vera struggled. The image of Canty, branded as a criminal, haunted her. The memories of their love clashed with the allegations, leaving her torn between loyalty and disillusionment. Meanwhile, Canty found himself back in a prison cell, this time under the oppressive control of South Coast authorities. Tecumseh ensured his treatment was harsh, stripping him of any dignity or hope. Canty spent his days replaying the events that had led to his downfall. He knew the charges were fabricated, but had no way to prove his innocence. Every attempt to reach out to Mrs. Jimmy or Mr. T was blocked. The guards taunted him relentlessly, parroting the media's narrative. "Enjoy your stay, drug lord. The governor's got big plans for you." Months later, Canty was already in deep depression. He understood why, but a flicker of hope lit within him. Perhaps this was still a chance to reconnect with someone who could help clear his name. One evening, a guard approached his cell. "You've got a visitor," he barked. Canty's heart skipped a beat when he saw Vera walk into the visitation room. She looked different, confident, polished, and distant. "Vera," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Vera's gaze was steely. "I need answers, Canty. Is it true? Were you really involved in drugs and murder?" Canty leaned forward, desperation etched across his face. "You know me, Vera. I could never do those things. Takam Sisi is behind all of this. He's framing me because I know too much." But Vera shook her head. "I want to believe you, but everything points to the opposite. The evidence, the reports, even the timing of your release and rearrest. It's all lies." Canty insisted, his voice rising. "Takam controls the system, the media, everything. Vera, please, you have to trust me." For a moment, something in her eyes softened. But the weight of public opinion and Boyo's influence tugged at her heart. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said quietly before walking out. After Vera's visit, Canty's despair turned into resolve. He couldn't let Takam win. He began compiling every detail he could remember: names, dates, and events that could expose the governor's crimes. Meanwhile, Mrs. Jimmy and Mr. T, though distant, continued to fight for Canty's freedom. They quietly gathered allies who believed in Canty's innocence, laying the groundwork for a potential breakthrough. Back in South Coast, Vera couldn't shake the memory of Canty's plea. His words replayed in her mind, clashing with the media's portrayal of him. Boyo noticed her unease and worked tirelessly to keep her attention on their growing empire. "You've done so much for South Coast, Vera," he would say. "Focus on what you've built here. Canty's just trying to drag you down with him." But at night, alone in her room, Vera would pull out an old photo of her and Canty, taken during happier times. A tear would escape as she whispered to herself, "What if he's telling the truth?" One day, while organizing a charity event for her boutique, Vera overheard a conversation between two attendees. They spoke in hushed tones about Takam Sisi's corruption, mentioning documents that could incriminate him. Her heart raced. Could this be the proof Canty needed? Vera decided to dig deeper, risking her newfound status and safety. She began to question her surroundings, the people she trusted, and the life she had built with Boyo. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Vera stood at a crossroads. Should she confront Takam Sisi and risk everything, or continue her life of comfort and security? Canty, though still imprisoned, clung to the hope that Vera would see the truth and fight for him. The battle for justice, love, and redemption was far from over. The news of Canty's transfer to the South Coast prison made headlines across national television. Takam Sisi ensured the story was sensationalized, painting Canty as a ruthless drug lord linked to multiple murders. Images of confiscated drugs, weapons, and counterfeit documents were paraded before the media, allegedly traced back to Canty's operations. In his cold, dim cell, Canty watched the broadcast on the shared prison television, his stomach churning with despair. "How far will Takam go to destroy me?" he muttered. His cellmate, an older man named Gita, shook his head. "They've built a fortress of lies around you, my friend. If you don't find a way to expose them, you'll rot here." Canty clenched his fists. "I need help, but no one can reach me. The one person I trusted," his voice trailed off as he thought of Vera, her face flashing in his mind. The fabricated narrative about Canty shook Vera to her core. Despite her love for him, the mounting accusations made her question everything. Was he truly capable of the crimes Takam alleged? Could she have been so blinded by her feelings that she overlooked the truth? One evening, Vera sat in her boutique's office, scrolling through news articles. Each headline seemed to scream Canty's guilt. Suzy, sensing Vera's unease, stepped in with 2 cups of coffee. "You've been glued to that screen all day," Suzy said. "What are you thinking?" Vera sighed deeply. "What if they're right, Suzy? What if I've been defending someone who doesn't deserve it?" Suzy placed a comforting hand on Vera's shoulder. "You know Canty better than anyone. Do you truly believe he's capable of this?" Vera hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know anymore." In his sprawling mansion, Takam Sisi watched the unfolding drama with satisfaction. He had meticulously orchestrated every piece of evidence against Canty, ensuring no trail led back to him. His aide entered the room with a folder. "Governor, the public response has been overwhelmingly in your favor. They believe Canty is a menace you've heroically brought to justice." Takam smirked. "Good. But we're not done. Keep feeding the media with stories. The more they believe he's guilty, the less anyone will question us." He leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink. "And keep an eye on Vera. She's unpredictable." Haunted by memories of Canty and driven by a need for closure, Vera decided to visit him. She arranged the visit secretly, not wanting Boyo or Takam to find out. The prison walls loomed large as Vera stepped into the visitors' area. Canty was led in, shackled and visibly thinner. His eyes lit up briefly when he saw her, but the light quickly faded when he noticed her guarded expression. "Vera," he began, his voice hoarse. "You came." Vera nodded, her hands trembling. "I needed to hear the truth from you." Canty leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Everything they're saying about me is a lie. Takam framed me because I threatened his empire. You know me, Vera. You know I'd never do the things they're accusing me of." Vera averted her gaze. "But the evidence, Canty. It's overwhelming. How do I ignore it?" Canty's heart sank. "Look into your heart, Vera. You once believed in me. Don't let them take that away from us." Vera stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to believe anymore." She turned and left, leaving Canty to grapple with the crushing weight of her doubt. Back at home, Boyo noticed Vera's restlessness. She spent more time in her boutique and less time with him and Eddie. Sensing an opportunity, Boyo began lavishing Vera with attention and gifts, reminding her of the stability he offered. "You don't need to stress yourself with Canty's mess," Boyo told her one evening over dinner. "Focus on what we've built here. You're respected, admired. Don't throw it all away for a man who's only brought chaos to your life." Vera nodded silently, his words planting seeds of doubt. Meanwhile, Mrs. Jimmy refused to give up on Canty. She enlisted Mr. T to investigate the evidence against him, convinced of his innocence. "We're up against powerful enemies, Mrs. Jimmy," Mr. T warned. "Takam has covered his tracks well." "Then we dig deeper," she replied. "Canty's life depends on it." Their efforts uncovered inconsistencies in the drug charges and witness statements, but proving them in court would be an uphill battle. One night, as Vera sorted through old photos, she found a picture of her and Canty at a beach, laughing and carefree. The image stirred something deep within her, a reminder of the man she fell in love with, not the monster the media portrayed. She decided to visit Mrs. Jimmy. Over tea, Vera confessed her confusion. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Mrs. Jimmy took her hands. "Vera, they want you to doubt him." That's their strategy. But you know Canty's heart. Don't let them win. As whispers of Mrs. Jimmy's investigation reached Tockham, he grew increasingly paranoid. He ordered his men to silence anyone who might expose his schemes. One of his targets was Gita, Canty's cellmate, who had overheard crucial details about Tockham's operations. One night, guards dragged Gita out of his cell, and he was never seen again. The next morning, Canty found a note hidden in his mattress. "They're watching everyone. Stay silent, or you'll be next." Tockham's next move was to target Vera's boutique. A surprise raid by tax officials led to accusations of financial irregularities. The boutique was temporarily shut down, tarnishing Vera's reputation. When Vera confronted Boyo, he feigned ignorance. "You're probably being targeted because of your association with Canty. Maybe it's time to distance yourself from him completely." But Vera wasn't convinced. She began to suspect Tockham's hand in the scandal. Despite the mounting challenges, Vera and Mrs. Jimmy pressed on. They uncovered a former associate of Tockham willing to testify about his involvement in framing Canty. As they prepared to bring the case to light, Vera found herself at a crossroads. She had to choose between the comfortable life Tockham and Boyo offered and the fight for justice that could cost her everything. "Sometimes," Mrs. Jimmy told her, "doing the right thing means walking away from everything you know." Vera nodded, her resolve hardening. "For Canty, I'll risk it all." Canty's days in the South Coast prison were marked by monotony and despair, yet his mind refused to succumb to the crushing weight of his confinement. Every day was a battle against the system, against loneliness, and against the doubts creeping into his heart about Vera's loyalty. Prison life in South Coast was a world of its own, ruled by a brutal hierarchy. Gangs controlled everything from food rations to privileges like phone calls. The leader of the most powerful gang was a man known only as Razor. Razor approached Canty early on. "You're the guy from the news, huh? The big drug lord." His mocking tone carried a veiled threat. Canty, despite his circumstances, held his ground. "I'm not who they say I am." Razor smirked. "Doesn't matter what you are out there. In here, you're nobody unless I say otherwise." From that day, Canty became a target. Razor's men made every effort to break him, stealing his food, sabotaging his chores, and picking fights. The guards, emboldened by Tockham Cece's influence, treated Canty with relentless cruelty. One guard, Officer Bacco, took particular pleasure in tormenting him. During one routine inspection, Bacco tore through Canty's belongings, scattering them across the cell. "Contraband," he declared, holding up a family photo of Vera and Eddie. "That's my family," Canty protested. Bacco sneered. "Family? You're nothing but a criminal. They're better off without you." Despite the abuse, Canty kept his head high, refusing to give Bacco the satisfaction of seeing him break. Not everyone in the prison was against him. An elderly inmate named Bojo, known as Old Papa, took a liking to Canty. "You're not like the others," Old Papa said one day, sharing his ration of bread. "There's something in your eyes. You're a fighter." Canty smiled faintly. "I don't have a choice." Old Papa taught Canty how to navigate prison life, offering wisdom and companionship. "You survive here by holding on to what keeps you human. Don't let this place take that from you." Vera's occasional letters became Canty's lifeline. Though her words grew colder over time, They were a reminder that someone on the outside still cared. One letter read, "Canty, I visited you because I wanted answers, but I left with more questions. I'm struggling to reconcile the man I loved with the accusations against you. Please tell me the truth, even if it's hard to hear. Vera." Canty wrote back, "Vera, I swear to you on everything we shared, I am innocent. Tockham has orchestrated this entire ordeal to destroy me. Don't let his lies poison your heart. Canty." Canty remembered Gita. Canty's cellmate, Gita, was one of the few who believed in his innocence. Gita often shared stories of his life before prison and spoke cryptically about Tockham's reach. "People like him don't just frame you. They bury you," Gita warned. One night, Canty woke to find Gita being dragged from their cell by 2 guards. "Where are you taking him?" Canty shouted. The guards ignored him, and the next morning, Gita's bed was empty. Rumors swirled that he had been transferred, but Canty suspected foul play. Weeks later, Canty found a scrap of paper hidden under Gita's mattress. It read, "Tockham's secrets are buried deep, but not deep enough." Canty found solace in the prison library, a small room filled with tattered books. It was there he met Gide, a former lawyer serving time for embezzlement. "You're the guy they framed, right?" Gide asked, flipping through a legal textbook. Canty nodded. "How do you know?" Gide smirked. "I've seen Tockham's work before. He's untouchable outside these walls, but in here, he's just another name." Gide offered to help Canty research his case. Together, they pored over legal documents and precedents, searching for loopholes. "If you can prove procedural misconduct or tampered evidence, you might stand a chance," Gide explained. One evening, as Canty returned to his cell, Razor's men ambushed him in the corridor. The fight was vicious, with Canty sustaining several injuries before the guards intervened. In the infirmary, old Papa visited him. "They're trying to break you, son. Don't let them." Despite his pain, Canty felt a renewed determination. "They can beat me, starve me, and lie about me, but they can't take my truth." Canty began quietly building alliances with other inmates who had been wronged by Tockham. He learned of smuggled letters, hidden evidence, and names of people who might help on the outside. One inmate, a former journalist named Pund, offered to spread Canty's story if he ever got released. "People need to know the truth," Pund said. "And when the time comes, I'll make sure they do." As days turned into weeks, the psychological toll of imprisonment weighed heavily on Canty. Nights were the hardest, with doubts and fears creeping into his mind. "What if I never get out? What if Vera moves on?" he thought. But every time he felt himself sinking, he remembered Eddie's laugh, Vera's smile, and the life he was fighting to reclaim. One day, a new guard named Badmose approached Canty with a proposition. "I know you're innocent," Badmose whispered. "I've seen the files. But if you want my help, it'll cost you." Canty was wary but intrigued. "What do you know?" Badmose leaned closer. "Tockham's been paying off officials to keep you here. I have a list of names. But if they find out I told you, we're both dead." Canty's heart raced. "What do you want in return?" Amos hesitated. "Freedom. When you get out, you help me clear my name." Canty nodded. "Deal." Badmose handed him a slip of paper with several names, setting the stage for a new chapter in Canty's fight for justice.